We have some fantastic candidates this year, and you have the opportunity to see and get to know two of them this afternoon, both of whom are Democratic candidates for Arizona governor. So we have Mr. Steve Farley here.
Yay!
And Ms. Kelly Fryer. So what we're going to do is give them both 5 minutes each to give an opening statement, and then we're going to go to questions, and they will have 2 minutes to answer those questions. And we have Miss Evelyn, who has graciously agreed to be our timekeeper. Thank you very much, Evelyn, for doing that. Let's have Ms. Fryer give her opening. If you would, please, ma'am, and just go ahead and flip that microphone on, and I'll flip mine off. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. How does the volume seem in the room? Really loud? I don't know. You don't.
They like it.
A lot of you don't know me, but I used to be a pastor, so I can preach.
Oh.
So as Joe said, my name is Kelly Fryer, and I hope to be your next governor. I'm working really, really hard to make that happen. I am new to some of you, I know. Some of you might know me from my work at the YWCA here in Tucson. The YWCA is not the YMCA. It's not, doesn't teach people to swim. The YWCA is part of the oldest social justice and civil rights organization in the country. Our mission is ending racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And I'm the CEO of the YWCA here in Southern Arizona. I've been running for governor since January 9th, and this is the first time I've run for office. I've helped other people get elected. Prior to working at the YWCA, I was the executive director of Arizona List, which works to get women elected to state and local office. But I'm a first-time candidate. I'm the newest candidate in this race, and so it might surprise you to learn that the Republicans have their first attack ad out on TV. You knew it was coming, right? The very first attack ad is out. They've spent $1 million on these ads. They're running them on television in Phoenix, in the Phoenix market. And guess who one of their main targets is of this first attack ad? Me.
You.
Me. Not the distinguished Senator Farley, who's been in politics for 12 years. Me. Now, why do you think that is?
Because you're a woman.
Could, my girls, I'm going to give you props. Because you're a woman, maybe.
You're doing something right.
I think they're a little bit scared. They're a little bit scared. Why do you think they're scared? I have a couple hunches. Here's number one. Well, here's my hunch. I think that those Republicans know what the newspapers and the media hasn't figured out yet. Because if you've been following this race, what you might have noticed is that I'm not in the stories. In fact, the day after I filed to get on the ballot as governor here in Arizona, and I filed with more signatures than any other Democrat running for any other office in the state, the day after I filed, all the newspapers and TV stations said there were 2 candidates running for governor against Doug Ducey, and I wasn't one of them. The media hasn't figured this out yet. Even sometimes my opponents forget I'm running. But here's what the Republicans know. I can beat Doug Ducey. And that's why they're spending all this money. And here's why they know I can beat him. First of all, Doug Ducey and I are both CEOs. I've been the CEO and the senior leader of different kinds of organizations for 29 years. Both Doug and I have written budgets. We've had to, review and understand and make sense of financial reports. I have supervised thousands of people, paid and volunteer staff. I've sat in my office until late at night, looking at a computer screen, trying to figure out how to deal with the challenges that we have in our organization and how to meet the needs of our community and grow. But here's the difference. Doug Ducey, when he was the CEO of his own company, he put his profits into his own pocket. And I have spent my entire career serving my community. Doug Ducey is a business-as-usual politician who lies, who makes promises he knows he's not going to keep. Doug Ducey is a guy that even people in his own party don't trust. I've been a values-driven leader my entire career. And here's the other thing I think the Republicans know. Because I've spent 29 years walking into organizations that are in crisis and helping people come together to turn it around and grow. I think those Republicans know that when I beat Doug Ducey, I can actually create the change that will make Arizona work for all of us. Again, I'm Kelly Fryer, and I would very much like to be your next governor, and I'm looking forward to this conversation this afternoon.
Well, my name is Steve Farley. My name is Steve Farley. And I talk very loud, so I better leave it down here. And I'm your state senator right now, and I'm grateful you brought me back here. I've been here several times and met you before. I've been serving you for the last 12 years in the state legislature, representing this district, first in the state house for 6 years, and then in the state senate for 6 years. I'm the assistant minority leader in the Arizona Senate right now. I was the assistant minority leader in the Arizona House before that. One of the things that I'm most proud of is I actually am the first legislator to create a senior caucus in the legislature. We had a children's caucus for many years, but there was never any senior caucus, where I brought together legislators of both parties to come together and talk about issues that are vitally important for seniors and those who love them. I think that's an absolutely crucial thing for us to do. We just had our last meeting last Monday, in fact, and we get Republicans and Democrats working together to make things happen. I'm really excited about being your governor right now because we have an opportunity to change everything, and we have to. When you look at this country and the threats that our country faces, I think that one of the biggest ones we face right now is that polarization we're seeing, where we start to see each other as enemies instead of fellow Americans who may disagree about things. And I have a track record in the legislature of actually being able to bring people together, and not just in the legislature. I've done it long before I decided to become an elected official. I only decided to become an elected official when I was 44 years old. Before that, I've actually run my own business since 1991. I'm a graphic designer and public artist. And those of you who've been downtown in the last 20 years, you know those big black and white photo murals of people walking down the street in the 50s and the 40s on Broadway just east of downtown? Those black and white photo murals, those are mine. And I'm an artist, I'm a public artist. I do those murals all over the country. And I think it's kind of important when you have the kind of problems that have been left for us in the legislature by this governor and the previous governor and this legislative majority. It's important to be able to use both sides of your brain when you've got to solve problems that bad. And I've got my right brain and my left brain going to be able to make that happen. I'm really excited about the opportunity this year because I think there is so much energy for change in this state. You know, having served for 12 years in the legislature, and by the way, I'm the only Democratic candidate running who has ever served in elected office. And those years in the legislature, not only have they given me the experience in all the policies that come before the governor, it's also given me the experience in the process and the people and knowing how to be effective as governor from day one. There's no learning curve for me. I'm not intimidated by the legislature. I know how to use a carrot, and I know how to use a stick when necessary. And I know how to get things done. I've been able to get it done, even working across the aisle. When Jan Brewer, of all people, who I disagreed with about almost everything, decided that she was going to do something unusual. She reached out to me and said, do you think you can keep the caucus together if I decide to expand Medicaid health care to 400,000 people in poverty? And I said, yes, we can. We held the caucus together, we got a few Republicans on our side, and we rolled the speaker, we rolled the president, we got it done. We literally saved lives and kept our hospitals afloat who were in danger of going under from the cost of unreimbursed care. It's possible to work together and get things done. And we can win this year. When you see the energy that's coming out in the Democratic Party, you see people rising up and acting like I've never seen before. We've quadrupled the number of Democratic precinct committee people since Trump was elected. And as upset as a lot of us were about that election in November 2016, my youngest daughter, Gigi, she spent 3 days after that election locked in her room binge watching Hillary videos and sobbing. And I think we all felt that way to a certain extent. But ultimately, we'll look back at that as the day complacency died. And that's a good thing. We need to stand up and take part in saving our democracy, doing everything we can to do that. But I think not only can we can win together. I've been talking with people all over the state of all parties, and even Republicans want change now. In rural areas in particular, I'm seeing Republicans say that they are sick and tired of these cuts to our education system. Because even in rural areas, you've got the public district schools, the center, the heart of their communities, and they're furious with Doug Ducey for what he's done. My parents were both public school teachers. My daughters both went through Arizona public schools. And we have, and I saw, particularly my daughter's last 4 years at Tucson High, where she was number 17 in the class of 755. I saw the devastation wrought upon our public education system by these cuts.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot we can do to be able to fix that. But we have to have a governor who actually believes in public education. And that's me. We have the money to invest in our public education system at every level. We've chosen to give it away. When Doug Ducey says we don't have the money, he's lying. I know we can get this done, and I have the ideas to make it happen, and I have the experience to be able to make it work. I'm also the only Democratic candidate who has ever won an election. I've won 6 in a row, so I know how to win. We got to get this thing done, and I'd love to have your help. Thank you so much for having me today.
This microphone is laying down on the job here. Reminds me of our current government.
Name it for Doug Ducey. Huh?
All right, thank you. Thank both of you so much for your opening statements. Let's go ahead and ask a question or two of these two candidates. And, you know, I'll bet you that both of you are expecting a question on education. So I'm asking a question on health care instead. Yes. So the question is, how would you propose as our next governor to protect and enhance Arizona's Medicaid system for the recipients? In other words, what would you do to ensure that our rural communities have access to affordable, quality health care? And Mr. Farley, if you would start us off, please. So that would be 2 minutes.
2 minutes, absolutely. I mentioned you before when I worked and led the effort to be able to restore Medicaid health care to 400,000 people in poverty. That was absolutely a watershed moment. And we were able to keep our hospitals afloat because the year before that happened, Tucson Medical Center actually lost $25 million that year to unreimbursed care costs. And there were some hospitals in the state that actually went under, particularly in rural areas. Down in Douglas, their hospital went under. But the year after we put that into place, that $25 million loss was cut to $8 million at Tucson Medical Center. So they saved that money and they're staying healthy fiscally. But we have to do better. The fact is, right now, when you see what's going on in Washington, D.C., we should be very worried about what's happening, not just with Medicaid, but the threats to Medicare and Social Security as well. Because the way that those tax cuts went through last year, with full support of Governor Ducey, by the way, that's going to create unimagined budget pressures that we've heard a lot of the Republicans in Washington, D.C. will use as an excuse to cut back on Social Security and Medicare. We must resist, and we must be able to protect our citizens here as the state if we get that kind of attack from Washington, D.C. We cannot trust Governor Ducey to do that. Last year, there was a bill called Graham-Cassidy that would have gotten rid of the Affordable Care Act, which allowed Medicaid to be expanded, and would have replaced it with nothing at all. Doug Ducey came out that first day he heard about it and said, I endorse it. We got to get rid of Obamacare. Then we found out from our economists in the state that it would have eliminated 500,000 people from health care, and it would have cost our state $11 billion over the next 10 years. What did he do when he found that out? He doubled down and decided to endorse it even more. That's because he's not governing for the people of Arizona. He's governing for a couple of Kansas billionaires who fund the network that funds his campaign. And they told him he has to get rid of Obamacare, no matter how badly it hurts the people of Arizona. That cannot happen. We must stop. Our Medicaid program, which is also called Access, is hugely important to so many different people. And it also could be used as a way for people to buy into Medicaid. In fact, we did have a program called Healthcare Group that I was on as a small business person in the 90s, where small business owners and sole proprietors were able to get into healthcare by buying into the Medicaid system, and it cut my premiums in half and got me better coverage. Because as I go all over the state, I hear that from a lot of people. Even people who have coverage are worried that they won't be able to afford to use it. We have to change that. And that's something that will happen in one of my top priorities as governor. Thank you.
I can remember the afternoon that my mom called me. My mom lives in Florida. She would like to live here in Tucson, so she'd be closer to me and grandkids, but she's stuck in Florida, living in a house that lost half of its value after the 2008 recession and hasn't recovered yet. And I remember the day that she called me up not too long ago, and she told me exactly how old she would be when she runs out of money. And she said, I hope I die before that happens. We live in the United States of America, the wealthiest nation in history. The fact that we have people in our nation who have worked hard their whole lives, who have saved, who have served their community, worried about the day that they'll run out of money is, I think, an outrage, a moral outrage. This is not a political question. This is about who are we? What are our values? This is a moral crisis that we're in. We need to do everything we can do to protect Medicaid, to protect Social Security, and to create a safety net so that the most vulnerable people in our country and here in our state never have to worry about having nothing. Here in Arizona, the only way we're going to solve the healthcare crisis is to have Medicare for all in this country. It's the only way it's going to happen. But I think we can create a stopgap by enabling people in our state to buy into the Access program, which is one of the few things that Arizona is doing pretty okay right now. We can make sure that everyone in our state has access to affordable health care. But the larger issue is we need leaders at every level of our government, starting with our governor, who will put people first, not profit. Thanks for the question.
And Steve, did you want to respond? Either one of you can respond as we go through.
All right, let's stay on the subject of healthcare for one more question here, because if you do not have your health, you don't have your freedom, do you? It's so critical. So the next question is, what would you do, what could you do as the Arizona governor to rein in the cost of prescription drugs? And Kelly, you would go first on this, please.
Well, this is the heart of the problem that we face in our healthcare system. And that is that we have big companies, pharmaceutical companies, big insurance companies, who are big donors to our elected officials. And so they're really calling the shots. As long as we have politicians who are bought and paid for by these big companies, it's going to be very difficult to create change. As I said, I think that there are some things that we can do on the state level to ensure affordable health care for everyone. And that includes affordable access to prescription drugs. But in order to get there, we need a governor and state legislators who are not in the pocket of these big companies. We need to have people who have stand on a moral center, who have the values that most Arizonans share, and who are able and willing to stand up to these big corporations and do what's right for the people of Arizona. That is at the heart of every single issue that we face. You'll probably hear me say this a few times today. The problem is we have leaders who are working for big companies and not for us.
There's something we could do that's very simple that we should have been doing a long time ago, except for we have a governor now and a governor previously who don't believe the governor should have a role in healthcare at all. We can do this. And the way we do it is we allow our access program, our Medicaid program, it's called Access. They already negotiate drug pricing with pharmaceutical companies. And because they buy in bulk for the large number of people who are below 133% of poverty, who currently are part of the Access program. We can expand that program. So we have a program in Arizona where everybody has access to affordable quality health care, where we use that negotiating power that Access already has to do the deals with the pharmaceutical companies to tell them, look, we're not going to buy those drugs unless you give us a certain deal. And that's the way other states have been doing it. We haven't been doing it, and we can easily do that, and that's exactly what I will do as governor. That will reduce prices dramatically because it's already been proven to do it within folks who are on Access, and we can do it with everybody. The biggest problem we've had is that when I was going in, I told you about this thing called Healthcare Group, where small businesses and sole proprietors were able to buy into Medicaid, and it cut my premiums in half when I was a small business owner and got onto it, because I was dealing with a Cigna plan in the individual market. If you were ever on the individual market, you know it's a terrible place to be. And this worked. But I tried, when I got elected to the legislature in January 2007, I was fighting to keep it alive for years. Was that it? Okay, good. So I'm not getting part of the answer there. And I can talk about that one at some point later too. But there are folks right now writing policy for Governor Ducey who are not interested in actually helping healthcare, but getting rid of the government's involvement in healthcare.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about another very fundamental problem that we have and that we are facing here in this state, and that is water. There are predictions, as you may well know, that the cost of water in the next several years could potentially skyrocket. And it's hard to imagine the impact that that will have on our economy and on individuals here in the state. So we have a water question. We will have Steve go first on this. Do you believe that water conservation and recycling should be the most important part of a strategy to make our water supply last for generations to come? Should it be a priority in all of Arizona? Mr. Farley.
I think it absolutely should. Conservation is probably the cheapest way to be able to save on water. And there's easy ways for us all to be able to do it. And actually, frankly, the whole state could learn from Tucson, because we've been able to use a lot less per person than the folks in the Maricopa County area. And we have to get on top of that and spread that throughout the entire state. But I'm glad we're talking about water in a place called the Fountains. And I'm presuming that's recycled water out there. Thank you. The thing not to do to solve our water problems is to convene secret meetings with invitation-only people behind closed doors to figure out how you can solve a political problem the way that this governor did last year. That was Governor Ducey's idea for how to do it. The way you do it is you look at, for a model, at Governor Bruce Babbitt, who created the 1980 Groundwater Act by convening for 3 years people at the table everyone from Arizona who represented an interest in Arizona. Everybody. Even if you didn't think you liked what they were going to say, you got to have them at the table. Because we're all sharing this same metaphorical aquifer here, and we're all in trouble if we run out. We're nearing dead pool at Lake Mead. We're having climate change effects in which we're with less water, so we've got to attack climate change. And the first thing I will do as governor is put our state right back in the Paris Climate Change Accords as a state, because we're ground zero for climate change here in Arizona, with wildfires, water, and heat. But the water is a major part of that. We've got to get together and solve this problem at the same time with everybody at the table and commit to doing this together. And that's the kind of leadership I'll provide as governor. Thank you.
I'm not sure there's a more important issue right now than the water crisis facing our state. As governor, there's actually quite a lot that you can do. One of the first things I'll do is to create 2 task forces directly related to the environment. One is a water task force that brings together our best scientists. Both at the University of Arizona and at ASU, we have some amazing work being done. And they're doing work in environmental solutions for other countries. And because our own state isn't listening to them. So I'll bring together our best scientists, energy entrepreneurs who are at work here in our state, who are creating solutions that again are being used in other states and other countries, representatives of our tribal nations and impacted communities. And I'm going to ask them to create a comprehensive plan for water in our state within 6 months. We need to look at the whole picture. The source of water, our groundwater, conservation practices. In direct answer to your question, should conservation be at the top of the list? Yes, of course it should. That's one of the easiest things that we can do. And so, to that end, on my first day, I'm going to sign an executive order creating a 2030 district here in Arizona. A 2030 district means that everyone in that district will agree to cut carbon emissions and water use in half by 2030. There are 2030 districts that have been created all across the United States, in cities and towns. We would be the first state to become a 2030 district, and I'll include in the 2030 district, it'll be a non-geographic district that includes every building our state owns, including all of our schools and university buildings. That will have an enormous impact on leading us toward a sustainable future here in Arizona.
Thank you. Staying somewhat on that same theme, let's talk about climate change. Have you both heard of climate change?
It's not human caused, I've heard.
Okay, all right. So in fact, I was actually going to ask both of them that, is that, do you believe that human-caused climate change is a significant threat? But as the next Arizona governor, what can you do to help mitigate the effects of climate change in this state?
Well, I'm just going to pick up right exactly where I left off. But I want to just insert. I don't think it matters what's causing climate change. Why are we arguing about what caused it? The reality, it's happening, and we need to respond. And so let's start arguing about the right thing. What are we going to do so that, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren can live and thrive here in this beautiful state and in this beautiful nation? And so creating that non-geographic 2030 district will address this issue here in Arizona in a very concrete way. Again, what it will do is it will put us on a path toward cutting our carbon emissions and our water use in half by 2030. Now that's going to require a pretty big investment, isn't it? That's going to require some state dollars, it's going to require some private investment, it's going to require some grant money, and it's going to require buy-in from people around our state. Because somebody's got to convince all those people in Phoenix and Scottsdale to rip out those lawns. So that's why I say this is not a political issue alone. This is a moral issue. We need to have a very serious conversation as the people of Arizona about what do we value? Do we care about our kids? Do we care about our grandchildren? Do we care about our future? That's a conversation that I can help lead.
Well, as I said, the first thing that I will do as governor is put Arizona right back in the Paris Climate Change Accords as a state. And that means we can start to join in a compact with other Western states who are all at ground zero for climate change. You've seen the heat. You've felt the heat, the water, the fire, all the rest of those things. Last year, Sky Harbor Airport in Phoenix shut down for a day because at 116 degrees it was too hot for the planes to have lift. Climate scientists are saying that within 10 to 20 years, we're going to see 130 degrees regularly in Phoenix. Can we stand our state's largest port to be shut down for a month and a half every summer? And imagine what that means for all the rest of the things that come from that heat. We have to get a handle on this right now. And it actually does matter how it's caused. It is caused by humans, as 99.9% of scientists agree. And that helps us to find out how you solve that. One of the main ways this is solved is by carbon emissions from electrical generation. So the way you solve that is you switch to renewables. And here's the really good news. We can mitigate climate change in Arizona and also make a heck of a lot of money off of it. Because the fact is, we here in Arizona are exactly where Texas was with oil in the 1920s. It's our biggest natural resource, and the whole country needs it.
Sunshine.
Forget Texas oil or West Virginia coal. We should be running this country on Arizona sunshine.
Yeah.
We have the resource. We have the transmission infrastructure. We have the states nearby who are looking for renewable energy at a premium to pay us money for it, retrofit our entire electrical generation structure to solar, and then we make a bunch of money off that to invest in ourselves while mitigating climate change. That's a win-win-win scenario. It's exactly the sort of leadership and vision I will exhibit as governor.
Thank you.
You okay? All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's switch gears just a smidge here, and let's talk about comprehensive immigration reform. So as Arizona's next governor, would you support a federal comprehensive immigration reform? And what would be your role as governor in that process? Steve.
Well, I've been supporting comprehensive immigration reform since long before I was an elected official. I think all thinking human beings want to do that. There are ways we can solve our immigration problems. There are ways we can keep our borders secure without sacrificing human rights. The problem is, I think we have a party in power in DC, a party in power in Phoenix, who are interested in keeping the problem unsolved because it's a powerful political tool to motivate their base. That's been our problem. There are things we can do. The federal government, according to the U.S. Constitution, controls immigration policy. So we have to force the federal government to be able to act. We've been trying, we're going to continue to try, and we have to elect good people in Congress and good people in the president who are willing to do that and solve that issue. But there are things we can do here as a state. We certainly can make sure that we can stand up against these inhuman problems in which we have seen children separate from their parents at the border. And now they're being kept by military contractors in children's private prisons in Phoenix. And every time a journalist uncovers them, I go out there and I call for Governor Ducey to shut them down because they're operating without licenses, with kids bathing in sinks at the latest one they discovered, and then they pop up somewhere else. It's time to shut them down. At the same time, we need to not allow our dreamers to be deported, because our dreamers, those people who are here, who brought here as children, they are the brightest among us. They've served our country. They are the ones who are the future of our economy. They cannot be taken away from us because it will hurt us as an economy and as society. There's so much that we can do, including developing a lot of the Southern Mexican and Latin American states where people are fleeing from, so people can have a good life at home. And that can happen as a state. But what it takes is leadership and vision, and that's exactly what will happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there are three things that I'm going to do as soon as I'm elected governor. First thing I'm going to do is bring the National Guard troops home off the border. It was nothing but a political stunt to send them down there in the first place. Second, I'm going to end the contracts with private prisons and private detention centers and bring them under my control so that I can make sure that if our federal government is going to be detaining families and vulnerable innocent people, that they are being treated at the highest possible level of human dignity and respect. And the third thing I'm going to do is to begin changing the conversation in this country about who these folks are. It costs about $750 a day to keep a child in detention. Think about that. If you were going to go on vacation somewhere and spend $750 a day, you would expect a pretty swanky place, wouldn't you? We're spending $750 a day. And we don't know exactly how many kids are being detained across the country because they're not keeping track or they're not telling us. But we've heard 2,000, 3,000 to 10,000, somewhere in there. Let's say it's 2,000. We're talking about $1 billion a year just to detain the children. Who's benefiting from that? The people who own those detention centers, who donate to Doug Ducey and Donald Trump. So what we need to do is we need to talk about, not only is this immoral, but this is economically foolish. Imagine how many families who have come to our border looking for help, who are really vulnerable and scared and alone. Think about how many of them we could resettle. Like literally just help them find some place to live and pay their rent for the first 6 months and help them get jobs. So that within a year they could become tax-paying members of our society, which is really all they want. And we could do that for less money than we are now spending to detain these innocent people. Those are the first three things I'll do about the immigration crisis that's happening in our nation. And yes, we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need an immigration policy that isn't about militarization, but is about humanity.
Let's talk about education finally here. All right. I'm getting this wonderful feedback here. And why don't we focus on an initiative that is likely to be on your November ballot, which is called Invest in Ed, which provides a focused stream of revenue to public schools here in Arizona. And the question for our two wonderful candidates here is, what is your position on this initiative, Invest in Ed? Do you think Arizona voters are ready to raise taxes on the wealthy in order to fund our public schools? And Kelly,
Any of you listen to Christopher Conover on our local AZPM radio station? I just came from an interview with him, and he said, you know, I haven't seen you since the end of that first debate that you and the other two guys had, right after you announced for governor. He said, I remember you were the only candidate who was talking with in very specific terms about the need to reverse the tax cuts that had benefited the very wealthy and to create two new state income tax brackets. He said you were the only one who was willing to go out on the limb and say that at that point. Well, since then, 270,000 people have signed a petition saying that's exactly what we need to do. So yeah, I not only support Invest in Ed 100%, but I was out in front of that issue as well. I've run businesses, my own businesses and nonprofit businesses. Even churches have budgets. I know that if you're not paying attention to the revenue stream in your business, eventually you're going to go out of business. Well, that's what's happening in our state right now. Our governor is so infatuated with tax cuts for the very wealthy that he's killing our budget, our revenue, and our state. So yes, we need to fix our revenue structure. Now, some people are saying that's about passing tax cuts on the rich. I guess that's one way to put it, but here's the truth. All we're talking about is reversing the tax cuts that have been given to the very wealthy over the last number of decades. Right now, the upper tax bracket for people who make $1 million a year or more, it's lower today than it was in the 1960s. And it's roughly the same that it was in 1933. We need to reverse those tax cuts and quit giving breaks to the people who need those breaks the least, so that we can do the work that needs to be done for the most vulnerable in our communities, starting with our kids. Thank you.
I do support the investment initiative because I will support anything that provides money for public education. I've seen too many cuts, $1.1 billion in our K-12 system alone in the last 10 years in this legislature, and I have fought against every single one of them. And I was leading the fight this year during Red for Ed Week, when teachers are watching, as we were able to increase education funding to K-12 by $405 million in the next fiscal year alone, upping Doug Ducey's last and best offer of $33 million, because the teachers showed up and I was able to work behind the scenes and get this done. Absolutely huge. But we need more. Even if InvestInIt passes, that $690 million still just gets us to where we were in 2008, and we weren't in a great place in 2008, let me tell you. We have to invest in our education system at every level, and we have the money. I mentioned earlier about these corporate sales tax loopholes. I'm the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee. I was the ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee. I'm on the Appropriations Committee and the Budget Committee, so I know our budget and our finances inside out. We spend about $10 billion a year on our budget on everything. We give away $13.7 billion a year in corporate sales tax loopholes alone. Those are things like if you buy a 3-inch pipe at the hardware store, you pay sales tax. If you buy a 4-inch pipe, you don't. That only makes sense if you're a corporation that buys a lot of 4-inch pipe in Arizona. There is one, a Nevada corporation you may have heard of, called Southwest Gas. Every month we pay our bill. They take some of our money, they hire a lobbyist, they go to the legislature, they get themselves breaks. And there are 330 other corporate sales tax loopholes just like that. If we could eliminate just $3 billion worth of those, we could lower our sales tax rate by a full percent while increasing our education spending by $2 billion a year. And that's enough not just for 20% teacher raises, but 20% raises for all educators, for all-day K, pre-K, K-12, JTED career and technical education programs that were cut by Doug Ducey entirely his first year out of the office. Our community colleges that don't have any state support in Pima, Maricopa County. And our universities that got cut by $2.5 billion since 2009. We can invest in it all and create a platform for lifetime learning to give us the foundation for thriving this century, not merely surviving, and giving everyone the opportunity they have to be able to rise in a new economy. That's investment. And that's how you do it with the money we already have, by taking away the special interest loopholes that nobody agrees with.
Here's a question here.
What's the difference? How come they don't have that access? The state colleges and so forth.
Because she was asking why doesn't Pima, Maricopa County community colleges have state funding? That was cut off in 2009 by Jan Brewer and the Republican majority in the legislature, and they have not restored it ever since. Because that's something that they haven't thought was a priority. There are plenty of people in government, in this legislature, in this majority, who have called public schools government schools because they thought that it was some socialist plot, that we were taking money away from people and giving it away for people who indoctrinate students. So that kind of attitude has caused that kind of cut from our education system, but it's the best tool we've ever had to allow people to lift themselves from poverty, and 1 in 4 kids live in poverty right now in the state.
Well, let's let Kelly respond to that question.
I just have a question, Steve. I've been really wondering this. We've been doing this for months together now. And my question is, as I've looked at the sales tax exemptions, most of them are for food and healthcare and medical supplies and a lot of things that people really rely on. And as I look at the list of 13 billion sales tax exemptions, I've only been able to identify about 1.5 billion that I think we could cut or we could get rid of. That these are exemptions that really only benefit the very wealthy. And I have those listed on my website. And I'm wondering if you have a list or plan to release a list of the exact sales tax exemptions that you plan to get rid of that would add up to that $3 billion. And my second question is, how do you get that through the state legislature? Because I've heard you say that this is something that even Republicans agree with, but it hasn't happened in 12 years. And so I'm just wondering, what's going to be different when you're the governor? How do you get the Republicans to agree to do this when you haven't been able to do that so far? That's a real question.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. As I've said numerous times in other debate situations, that's one of the differences between my opponents and the Democratic side is I actually have the experience and the ability to work across the aisle. One of the things I do when I'm keeping myself sane in the legislature is I try to find people I disagree with the most and figure out how I can work together with them. There's a guy named David Farnsworth. He is an extremely far right-wing Tea Party guy. He's a senator from East Mesa. I disagree with him about a lot of things. But when he first came in, I pitched him an idea so we could work together. At the time, if you sliced a tomato in your school cafeteria and you grew in your school garden, you were committing a crime. It didn't make any sense to me, and it didn't make any sense to him either. It was some sort of public health bureaucratic thing. So we had some stakeholder meetings, we got some legislation through, and now if you slice that tomato, you're not going to jail. So that's not earth-shaking, but it creates a relationship. Last year, Senator Farnsworth became the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, a very powerful position. I brought him my bill, Democratic bill with a Democratic name on it, that would force review of all 331 of these corporate sales tax loopholes at least once every 10 years, if they could justify themselves for the overall economy. Now, some of these haven't been reviewed for 60 years. If they could justify themselves for the overall economy, you keep them. If they couldn't, you get rid of them and recover those revenues. He signed on as a co-sponsor. It passed unanimously for the Senate Finance Committee, and it passed the Senate 28-2 with some of the most conservative members of the Senate in favor of that bill. It only takes 20 to be able to increase revenues to the state. That's 28. So the thing that I learned about that was that even the Tea Party don't like that special interest giveaways any more than we do. I speak really good Republican. So I go all over and I talk with Republican areas of the state as well as Democratic areas. And I think there's a capability of us working together to attack those things. And I've proven the ability to make it happen in the legislature. And I know that there's the appetite out there to make it happen. And I can't wait to have the opportunity and the powers as governor to be able to make that work and finally have a finance structure that works for everybody, not just connected insiders.
So, I know I'm a woman, so I'm supposed to just be nice. I didn't hear an answer to the question about, are you going to be willing to say what those $3 billion worth of sales tax exempt? I think probably your donors might like to see that list. But I've only heard the story about the tomato and the story about the Jan Brewer and Medicare as examples of being able to work together with this legislature. And again, I'm just concerned that that this is just not going to be possible to work with this current legislature. And since I've spent 29 years working in dysfunctional systems to help create change, I know that it's a very complicated thing, and it's not as easy as just reaching across the aisle. So, again, I know I'm a girl and I'm supposed to be nice, but these are serious questions, I think, that go to leadership experience and leadership ability to actually get things done, and a willingness to be transparent. I've listed on my website what I think those sales tax exemptions are that need to go away. And I'm wondering if you are going to be willing to do the same thing.
So we'll give Steve the opportunity to answer this question, and we'll be done with this particular line of questioning.
The reason why I do not list specifically the types of things I'd like to get rid of, with the exception of that 4-inch pipe tax loophole, is because when you need 20 votes in the legislature to be able to increase revenues to the state, you can't just do it with one party. You've got to work with people across the aisle. And I've heard Reverend Fryer talk about the importance of marginalizing Republicans as her strategy for governing in the legislature. I don't think we ought to marginalize anybody, and I actually don't believe that any one party has any corner on the market of good ideas. I've actually worked with folks on the other side a lot, constantly, and I may highlight certain things, but in 12 years in the legislature, you get a lot of experience working with folks on a lot of different areas. I don't think she's heard my story about how I was able to restore arts funding by working across the aisle that was cut by Jan Brewer in 2009 to fund arts organizations all over the state at the local level. In terms of the list of loopholes, when you work with folks on the other side, and you're a Democrat and you're running for governor, and you issue a list of the loopholes you want to get rid of, you're basically saying these are the ones that the Republicans won't agree to. You have to work together. Just like I said, when Doug Ducey said he was going to solve water and had invitation-only people at the table that he already agreed with, secret meetings, that's not how you do stuff. You got to get everyone at the table. If you've got to work with the Republicans to increase revenues, as you do, you get them at the table and then you work it out, and everyone, without any preconceived notions of what you're going to get rid of, everyone comes together and says, what about this one? What about this one? What about this one? If you list what you have in advance that you're going to get rid of, you've already showed your hand, and you have no capability of actually getting it done. And I think I would argue that's what makes me the person best qualified to be governor, because I understand how that process actually works and have actually demonstrated being able to do it in the legislature in a wide range of issues.
Alrighty, and so we're starting to get a little more towards the philosophical end of things here, which I think is great. And let's ask one more question, and then we will have closing comments from both of you. And the question is, there's a lot of differences here between the two of you and Doug Ducey. Have we covered some of those today, and others we haven't had time to talk about, such as guns in Arizona and other things like that. But what really, do you feel, what really most sets you apart from our current governor? And not necessarily an issue, but what's driving this insanity? And what sets you apart from our current governor? And Steve, you're next. Thank you.
This is a good question because it gets to the heart of why I'm running. When I've served at this time, and I've seen the legislature, and I've seen the governor, I've seen the state operate in all its different departments. What I've seen is when you have someone like Doug Ducey in the governor's office, who does not believe in the basic idea that government can be a force for good in people's lives. He hires people to head the departments of state who don't believe in the mission of their own department.
Yeah.
So what you get is you get corruption, you get people who are treating their people terribly, and who are cutting their own department because that's what they were hired to do, rather than to make their department better to serve the people of Arizona. You look at the Department of Revenue, for example. When you have a corporate tax audit at the Department of Revenue, they cost a certain amount of money in salary, of course, but they bring in $1.5 million per person in revenue to the state from tax cheats. Governor Ducey fired 150. Fired 150. At the cost of $230 million to the state. Mm-hmm. In order to allow tax cheats to be able to get away with whatever they wanted to. Mm-hmm. He hired a guy in charge of DES, Department of Economic Security, named Tim Jeffries, who he said 2 weeks before he was finally fired, he wished he could clone him. Yeah. He was fired for buying drinks for the staff on the job, celebrating how many people he fired in his department that week. And after he was fired, it was discovered that he had a private militia with 80,000 rounds of ammunition in the basement of DES, bought with taxpayer money. And he designed uniforms with a happy face on the back. This is the guy Doug Ducey wished he could clone. 6 different department heads have left under a cloud in the 3.5 years of the reign of Doug Ducey. That's what happens when you have somebody who is governing for a couple of billionaires from out of state instead of the people of Arizona. I believe that the people who will work in my administration will believe in the mission of the department and believe in the honor of public service above all. It is a privilege to be able to serve. It has been a privilege for me to serve you as your senator for the last 12 years and your representative. And I don't get a whole lot of money for it because I don't want a whole lot of money to serve. I am getting that recompense from the privilege of service. My parents were both public school teachers. They taught me about the importance of that. I want to be able to give what I can to the people of Arizona to be able to improve this state. We love this state. The climate, the culture, the people, the food, everything about it is amazing, except we've been so poorly led. Imagine what we could be with good leadership. Imagine that. And with what I've learned over my time in the legislature, how we can turn things around, how we can work together with people we don't even agree with in order to turn things around. There's no limit to how far we can go as a state with all the resources we have and the people we have. And I want to have the opportunity to do that as your governor. Thank you.
We've given you a pretty exciting afternoon, haven't we?
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, I can remember watching the first human beings walk on the moon. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And I watched it on a little black and white TV with rabbit ears. I can remember when our government leaders dreamed big dreams and had an imagination for what we might be able to accomplish if we work together. We have a governor right now who says we can't pay our teachers enough to take care of their families and we can't fix our potholes. I think one of the biggest differences between Doug Ducey and me is that I really have a vision of creating an Arizona that works for everyone. No matter what geography you happen to live in, what part of the state, no matter what color you are, or what language you speak, or where you came from, or who you happen to love. I have a vision for an Arizona that really works for everyone. I have a plan to get us there. If you go to my website, which is FryerForArizona.com, don't look at me like you don't know how to get there, FryerForArizona.com, you'll see I have the most detailed policy proposals about the most issues of anyone running in this race. And I have 29 years of CEO and senior leadership experience to get us there. Now, that being said, Doug Ducey is using his voice right now to attack people who are calling for a human rights framework for immigration. He's standing in front of law enforcement, bragging about his border strike force while we have children in cages. Any one of the Democrats running for governor this year would be better than Doug Ducey.
Yeah.
Thanks to both of you. Let's have a closing statements at this point, and then you can stay, I hope, for a little while and have conversations with people. And Evelyn, our timekeeper, let's do closing statements from 3 to 5 minutes, roughly.
That much, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, sure.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
Closing the last statement.
You know what, you can go 3 minutes if you want to, or even less than that. So actually, Steve, you are up first for closing statements, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you again for being here. And I'm hoping that when you make your decision of who to vote for in the Democratic primary for governor, that you'll look at who has the ability and experience that comes from having served and from having won. But you'll also look at what that service means. When you see what I've done in the last 12 years, I've got a track record, so you don't have to just trust them saying nice things. You can look it up. You can see what I've done. You can see how I fought for things. You can see how when you know, for 11 years, I have led budget debate on the floor of the Senate, and before that, the House, to be able to pick apart budgets. When the Republicans run budgets, they run in the middle of the night. They don't really want a whole lot of people paying attention. But since being elected as your representative first and then senator, I have always wanted to share everything I've learned with you, to be totally accountable and transparent with everything I've got. That's why when I was first sworn in, that first week, I started writing this thing called the Farley Report. It's this email. It's about 2,000 or 3,000 words long. I've written them every week during session, every month out of session. I've written 301 of these. They're all on my website, so if you've got a sleepless night, they're better than melatonin. They might keep you awake, so maybe they're not as good as melatonin. But they tell what happened that week, how the policy works, what goes on, what's happening, and I'm fascinated with the idea that people can create a better government by understanding, getting more engaged in the part of that government. That's the basics of our democracy. And I want to be able to share what I learned. I want to represent that way. So in doing that process and sharing with people, in the middle of the night on budget nights for 11 years, I have been railing about budgets. The little things I was picking apart, the terrible cuts, terrible things happening in little different ways, and I've been railing to empty galleries in the Senate and the House. This year, the Red for Ed movement was a phenomenal experience when you had tens of thousands of teachers show up, occupy those galleries, occupy the Senate floor, first floor, the Senate third floor, watching in the plaza between all night long. We started at 8 p.m. for this budget and went until 4:45 in the morning. I gave my summing up speech and we went all the way to 6. And one of those teachers who was in the galleries filmed me giving my summing up speech at 4:45 in the morning. It was a budget policy speech. After 10 hours of debate, you wouldn't think that would be something that would go viral, but 53,000 people watching it the next week. Those teachers who were there watching me do my job at close range, they're galvanized to make me governor. Hundreds have signed up to volunteer for me all over this state. And I'm thrilled about the opportunity for us to be able to get this done. And yeah, I'm running against the co-governors. So it's not easy. And I don't have billionaires in my pocket. But I have thousands and thousands of everyday Arizonans who have been willing to answer my call. Because I spend those hour after hour calling people all over this state. And they've contributed to this campaign and helped us out. So we've actually been able to raise, in that way, through all these small donors, more money than any other statewide candidate of any party for either office except for Governor Newsom. So we're going to have the resources to be able to win this election. We have them now, and we're going to make that happen. It takes a lot of work, but I'm not shy about work. I saw my parents growing up as public school teachers, working constantly, spending their meager salaries on buying supplies for their kids in their classroom when the district let them down. I know what it is to work. And I think there's an opportunity right now in this country, in this political moment, for us to finally rise up and put someone in place who will respect and serve for the people of Arizona first, not a couple billionaires from out of state. That's exactly why I think this is happening right now, why I'm working constantly in order to get this done. And I've been doing it for 18 months. And I'm going to do it all the way through. And I can't wait to get Doug Ducey on the debate stage. That's going to be something. If he's willing to actually do it. Because I think this is the election that we win. He has 26% support for his re-election, according to an NBC News poll right now, amongst all parties in Arizona. 26%. This guy will lose. And I'm going to do everything I can to work with everyone I can in this state to be able to win this election. And I would be honored to have you with me after serving you for 12 years.
Yes, yes.
So I got my start really in my career at going to seminary. I don't know why I went to seminary. I had never heard a woman preach. It was 1985, and this was remember those days? Not very many women in ministry. And but I discovered while I was in seminary that I was actually pretty good at this pastor thing. In my field ed and my internship, and I was assigned when I graduated from seminary in 1989 to the North Central Illinois region of the country. And the bishop sent me out to interview because in my denomination, the people in the church had to vote for you to become their pastor. He sent me out to interview at Emmanuel Lutheran Church, a 125-year-old German Lutheran church that sat at a crossroads. One of those big white clapboard with the steeple and the hand-rung bell. The roads to get to the church were not on the map. I just had to look for the steeple and point my car in that direction. When I got to the church, I walked inside, and the search committee was sitting around a big table. There were 25 of them, and all of them were men. Because that church did not allow women in leadership. So here I am, 25-year-old young woman, walking into this church. I sat down, and we started talking. And they started asking me questions, and I started asking them questions. And this was back in the middle of the farm crisis. Remember that? Families were losing their farms. Farmers were committing suicide. We're back there again today, by the way. We started talking about how could that church reach its community and really make an impact? What could we do? What kinds of things could we do that would really make a difference? And we started brainstorming, and the more we talked, kind of the more excited we got about the possibility for change. And we started, telling jokes and talking about our families. And at the end of 2 hours, we started talking about when I was going to come back and meet the rest of the congregation so that they could vote for me to become their pastor. And as we all stood up to leave, there was one guy who was sitting down at the end of the table who hadn't said anything all night long. He just sat there. His name was Delphin Schlesinger. And he said into the room, I just have one thing to say. If this church calls a lady pastor, me and my whole family are leaving. Now, fortunately, I didn't know that a third of the church was named Schlesinger. I might have been even more nervous than I was. But I looked at him and I said, you know what, Delphin, I'm so happy that you said that. Because now that you've said that, we can talk about it. Because this is a big deal. So everybody sat back down and we spent another hour talking. And at the end of that hour, Delphin and his wife Arlene, they voted for me to become their pastor. And the next year, they all marched with me in the first Pride Parade in that little community. No, that didn't happen. That did not happen. I had you though, didn't I? Here's what did happen. They invited me to come back. I met the congregation, and they voted. And they voted for me to become their pastor. Now, Delphin and his wife Arlene did not vote for me, but they didn't leave either. And 3.5 years later, that little church had become the fastest growing congregation in the fastest declining county in the state of Illinois. And I had discovered that one of the things I'm good at is walking into a situation that is really dysfunctional. And can you think of a more dysfunctional place than our state capitol right now? I discovered that I can walk into a place that's really dysfunctional and help people come together around a shared set of values and a vision and work together to make it grow. After 3.5 years later, a whole bunch of other people discovered it too, and so I got called to another congregation to do the same thing. And I showed up at Emmanuel for my last Sunday. After 3.5 years later, I was feeling so sad to leave them. And Randy Schlesinger, who was Delphin and Arlene's son, met me at the front door. Randy was also the president of the church board by that time, which now had 3 women on it. Thank you very much. And Randy said to me, Kelly, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but my mom and dad are not going to be able to be here this morning to say goodbye. Because my dad doesn't want everyone in the church to see him cry. I've spent 29 years walking into organizations that are really in trouble and helping people come together to do what matters. Why has the Republican Governors Association spent $1 million to attack me? Because they know not only can I beat Doug Ducey, but I can help create real change in this state. My name is Kelly Fryer, and I would very much like to be your next governor. Thank you so much for hosting us today.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you so much, Steve, aren't they wonderful?
Yeah.
We are blessed. We truly are. We have a big battle ahead of us here to change the governor's seat in this state, and we need all of your help to do that. So we want to thank the Fountains and the Fountains staff and I want to thank each of you for showing up today and being engaged. That's wonderful. So please, ask them questions, harass them. Thank you.
But we don't have to.
Just don't throw it.